The coffee mug trembled against my lips as Sarah's laughter cut through the morning air like broken glass. She stood in my doorway, designer heels clicking against the worn linoleum, waving that cream-colored paper like a victory flag. "Enjoy your cramped little apartment, Kate," she said, her voice dripping with the same condescension she'd perfected since we were children. "While I'm hosting dinner parties in my new mansion." The deed fluttered in her manicured fingers, and I caught glimpses of the official seal, the bold lettering that spelled out her triumph. Riverside Manor, the estate our grandmother had promised would go to whichever granddaughter proved herself most worthy. Sarah had won, apparently, through her marriage to that pharmaceutical executive and her perfectly curated social media presence. I set my mug down on the chipped counter, the ceramic making a soft clink that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air, mixing with Sarah's expensive perfume, something French and floral that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Congratulations," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Sarah's smile widened, revealing teeth whitened to an unnatural gleam. "Oh, don't look so glum, little sister. Maybe if you'd actually made something of yourself instead of playing house in this." She gestured around my studio apartment with obvious distaste. "This closet, things might have been different." The morning light streaming through my single window caught the dust motes dancing between us, and for a moment I watched them spiral and drift, thinking about how some things fall while others rise. Sarah had always been the one who rose, prom queen, sorority president, married into money before she turned 25. I was the one who fell, dropped out of law school, worked 3 jobs to pay off student loans, lived in a 400-square-foot box that smelled perpetually of the Indian restaurant downstairs. "Remember when we used to play in Grandma's garden?" I asked quietly, surprising myself with the question. Sarah's expression flickered, just for a second. "That was a long time ago. You said you'd share everything with me. We made a pact by the old oak tree. We were children, Kate. Children say stupid things." She folded the deed carefully, sliding it into her Hermes bag. "Besides, sharing was never really your strong suit, was it? You always wanted what was mine." The accusation hit like a physical blow, and I felt my chest tighten. She was talking about Marcus, of course. My college boyfriend, who'd left me for her during my sophomore year. The wound had healed, but the scar tissue still pulled tight sometimes. "That's not." My phone buzzed against the counter, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. I glanced at it, then back at Sarah, who was checking her reflection in my bathroom mirror. "Aren't you going to answer that?" she called out. "Might be one of your employers. God knows you need every shift you can get." I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. The message preview showed only the beginning. Imperial Heights Acquisition Complete. Something cold settled in my stomach as I opened the message fully. The words seemed to swim before my eyes, rearranging themselves into an impossible reality. Imperial Heights Acquisition Complete, 98 luxury estates now under your name. Welcome to your new portfolio, Ms. Mesh. Your property manager will contact you within 24 hours to discuss management of your holdings. I read it again, then a third time. Sarah emerged from the bathroom, lipstick refreshed, smugness restored. "Well, was it work?" I looked up at her, this woman who'd spent our entire lives making me feel small, making me believe I was less than, making me accept scraps while she feasted. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I lifted it anyway, taking a slow, deliberate sip. "Something like that," I said and smiled. The color drained from Sarah's face as she caught something in my expression, something she'd never seen before. Her hand instinctively moved to her purse, to the deed that suddenly seemed very small indeed. "Kate." Her voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "What's wrong with you? You look—" But before she could finish, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name that made my blood freeze. Harrison Blackwood, the lawyer who'd handled our grandmother's estate. The man who'd supposedly awarded everything to Sarah just 3 days ago. Why was he calling me now? My finger hovered over the answer button as Sarah's eyes narrowed, studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become much more complicated than she'd anticipated. "Harrison Blackwood," I said aloud, watching Sarah's reaction. Her perfectly applied foundation couldn't hide the way the blood drained from her cheeks. "Don't answer that," she said quickly, her voice sharp with panic. "Kate, don't." I swiped to accept the call. "Ms. Mesh." Harrison's gravelly voice filled the small space between my phone and ear. "I apologize for calling so early, but we have a rather urgent situation that requires immediate clarification." "What kind of situation?" I kept my eyes locked on Sarah, who had gone completely still except for the rapid rise and fall of her chest. "It appears there's been a significant error in the execution of your grandmother's will. The deed your sister received yesterday, it's invalid. Completely fraudulent, I'm afraid." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, and I watched her sink onto my second-hand couch as if her legs had simply given out. "I don't understand," I said, though the pieces were already clicking together in my mind like tumblers in a lock. "Your grandmother's actual will, the real one, was discovered this morning in her safety deposit box. It seems the document we processed earlier was a forgery, quite sophisticated, but a forgery nonetheless. Ms. Mesh, your grandmother left everything to you. Not just Riverside Manor, but her entire portfolio. 98 properties across the country, including some of the most valuable real estate on the East Coast." I set my coffee mug down with trembling hands. The burnt toast smell seemed stronger now, mixing with the scent of Sarah's fierce sweat beneath her expensive perfume. "How is that possible?" I whispered. "Your sister apparently had access to your grandmother's personal papers during her final illness. She must have created the false will then, knowing your grandmother's mental state was compromised. We're launching a full investigation, of course, but the evidence is quite clear. I'm afraid Ms. Sarah will be facing serious criminal charges." Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal. She was staring at me with wide, desperate eyes, her perfectly manicured hands clutching at the fake deed in her purse. "Kate," she breathed. "Kate, please, I can explain." I held up a hand to silence her, my attention still focused on Harrison's voice. "There's more, Ms. Mesh. Your grandmother left specific instructions. She knew about the forgery, had suspected it for months before her death. She wanted you to discover the truth exactly this way, wanted your sister to believe she'd won before learning the reality of her situation." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest, surprising me with its bitterness. "She planned this. Every detail, including the timing of this call. She knew your sister would come to gloat, knew she'd want to see your reaction to losing everything. Your grandmother was quite thorough in her final wishes." I looked around my cramped apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the single window that faced a brick wall. All of it suddenly felt like a costume I'd been wearing, a role I'd been playing without knowing there was a script. "What happens now?" I asked. "I'll need you to come to my office this afternoon to sign the proper paperwork. And Ms. Mesh, you might want to start thinking about what you'd like to do with your new holdings. The property management company has been maintaining everything in your name for the past 6 months, as per your grandmother's instructions." 6 months. While I'd been working 3 jobs and eating ramen noodles, I'd already owned a real estate empire. I ended the call and set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. "Kate," she said, her voice small and broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was desperate, and Marcus was pressuring me about money, and I thought Grandma would never know, and you were always so good at getting by with nothing, and I just—" "Stop." The word came out harder than I'd intended, cutting through her babbling like a blade. Sarah flinched, as if I'd struck her. I stood up slowly, feeling like I was moving through water, everything dreamlike and surreal. The woman sitting on my couch, this person who'd tormented me my entire life, who'd made me believe I was worthless, who'd stolen my inheritance and then come here to mock me for my poverty, suddenly looked very small. "You forged legal documents," I said quietly. "You committed fraud. You let me work myself to exhaustion while you lived off stolen money. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Sarah whispered. "I was going to share with you eventually, I swear. Once things settled down. Once Marcus and I got established." "Like you shared Marcus?" She flinched again, tears starting to track through her makeup. "That was different. That was what? Love." I laughed, and the sound was ugly even to my own ears. "You don't love anyone, Sarah. You just take what you want and convince yourself you deserve it." I walked to the window, looking out at the brick wall that had been my view for 3 years. Soon, I'd never have to see it again. Soon, I'd have 98 different views to choose from. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked behind me, her voice barely audible. I turned back to face her, this woman who'd shaped so much of my life through her cruelty, her selfishness, her absolute certainty that she was better than me. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers, the fake deed crumpled in her lap like a dead thing. "I'm going to have some more coffee," I said. "And then I'm going to call in sick to all 3 of my jobs." "Kate, please." "The police. Harrison said there would be charges. I could go to prison." I poured myself a fresh cup, the steam rising between us like a barrier. "You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from a dying woman. She was our grandmother." "She was. And she loved me enough to make sure you'd face consequences for what you did." Sarah stood up abruptly, desperation making her movements jerky and uncontrolled. "I'll give it all back. The money I spent, the house, I'll sign everything over to you right now. Just don't let them arrest me. Please, Kate. I'm your sister." I took a sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. "You stopped being my sister the day you decided I didn't deserve what was mine." The sound that came from Sarah then was pure anguish, the cry of someone who'd finally realized that actions have consequences, that the world doesn't owe you anything just because you're beautiful and charming and used to getting your way. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Mesh, this is Patricia Chun from Blackwood and Associates. Mr. Blackwood asked me to inform you that the FBI will be arriving at your location within the hour to arrest Sarah Mesh on charges of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Please ensure she remains on the premises." I looked up at Sarah, who was staring at me with growing horror as she read the expression on my face. "What is it?" she whispered. "Kate, what's wrong?" Before I could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside my apartment, followed by a sharp, authoritative knock on the door. "FBI, open up." The knock came again, harder this time, rattling the thin door in its frame. Sarah's face went white as paper, her eyes darting between me and the door like a trapped animal looking for escape. "Kate," she whispered, grabbing my arm with fingers that dug in like claws. "Please. There has to be another way. I'm your sister. Federal agents." The voice boomed from the hallway. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Sarah Elizabeth Mesh." I gently pulled my arm free from Sarah's grip and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I could see 2 agents in dark suits, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent hallway lights. Behind them stood Harrison Blackwood himself, his silver hair perfectly combed despite the early hour. "Kate, don't," Sarah pleaded behind me. "I'll disappear. I'll leave the country. You'll never have to see me again." I turned back to look at her one last time. She was everything I'd once wanted to be. Beautiful, confident, successful. But sitting there on my second-hand couch with mascara streaking down her cheeks and desperation radiating from every pore, she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd built her entire life on lies and theft. "You know what the worst part is?" I said quietly. "It's not that you stole from Grandma. It's not even that you forged documents or committed fraud." Sarah's breath hitched. "Then what?" "It's that you came here this morning to hurt me. Even after taking everything, you still needed to make sure I knew how worthless you thought I was." The knocking intensified. "Ms. Mesh, open the door immediately." I reached for the deadbolt, then paused. "Sarah?" "Yes." Hope flickered in her eyes, pathetic and desperate. "Grandma left me a letter. Harrison read it to me over the phone while you were in the bathroom." Sarah's face crumpled. "What did it say?" She said she'd been watching us our whole lives. Watching how you treated people, how you treated me. She said she knew you'd try to steal from her eventually, so she set a trap. I smiled, and I could feel how cold it was. She said she hoped that when you finally faced consequences, you'd remember every cruel thing you'd ever done and understand that this was justice. The color drained completely from Sarah's face. She planned all of this? Every detail. The fake will you found was planted. The real one was always in the safety deposit box. She even arranged for the FBI to be notified the moment you tried to use the forged deed. Sarah made a sound like she was choking.
But why?
I'm her granddaughter, too. Because she loved me enough to protect me from you. I turned the deadbolt and opened the door. The agents moved with practiced efficiency. The first one, a woman with steel-gray hair and kind eyes, showed me her badge. Agent Martinez, FBI. We're here for Sarah Mesh. She's right there, I said, stepping aside. Sarah had collapsed back onto the couch, her whole body shaking. She looked up at the agents with the expression of someone who just realized they were standing at the edge of a cliff. Sarah Elizabeth Mesh, Agent Martinez said, approaching slowly with handcuffs ready. You're under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda rights filled my small apartment, I found myself thinking about the last conversation I'd had with my grandmother. She'd been in the hospital, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed. I'd thought she was barely conscious, but when I'd leaned down to kiss her forehead, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. Katie, she'd whispered, using the childhood nickname only she was allowed to use. Promise me something. Anything, Grandma. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small again. I'd promised, not understanding what she meant. Now, watching Sarah being led away in handcuffs, I finally did. Harrison Blackwood stepped into my apartment as the agents escorted Sarah out. She turned back once, her eyes meeting mine through the doorway. I'm sorry, she mouthed, tears streaming down her face. I nodded, but I didn't say anything back. Some apologies come too late to matter. Ms. Mesh, Harrison said once we were alone, I have the keys to Riverside Manor if you'd like to see your new home. I looked around my cramped apartment one last time. The water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the single window facing a brick wall. For 3 years, this had been my entire world. Now it felt like a cocoon I was finally ready to shed. Actually, I said, I think I'd like to see all of them. Harrison smiled. All 98 properties? Why not? I have time now. I picked up my coffee mug and took one last sip, savoring the bitter warmth. Then I set it down on the chipped counter and walked toward the door, toward whatever came next. As we stepped into the hallway, I could hear Sarah crying in the back of the FBI vehicle, the sound echoing off the walls of the parking garage. Part of me, a very small part, felt sorry for her. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Ms. Mesh, Harrison said as we waited for the elevator. Your grandmother left one more thing for you. He handed me an envelope, cream-colored and heavy, with my name written in Grandma's familiar handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. My dearest Katie, by the time you read this, you'll understand that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. You have everything you need now, not just the money and properties, but the knowledge that you are worthy of love, respect, and every good thing this world has to offer. Don't let anyone make you feel small again. All my love.
Grandma.
P.S. The penthouse in Manhattan has the most beautiful view. I think you'll like it there. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my pocket as the elevator arrived. Through the glass doors of the lobby, I could see the FBI car pulling away, taking Sarah toward whatever consequences awaited her. Ready? Harrison asked. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. I've been ready my whole life. As we descended, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. For the first time in years, the woman looking back at me didn't look small at all. She looked like someone who owned 98 properties and had finally learned her own worth. She looked like someone who would never let anyone make her feel small again. The elevator doors opened, and I walked out into my new life, leaving the cramped apartment and everything it represented behind me forever. Outside, the morning sun was burning away the last of the clouds, and the whole world seemed to shimmer with possibility. I took a deep breath and smiled. It was going to be a beautiful day.